I knew something was off the moment I saw the golf cart crawling down my street like it was patrolling a military base. It had flashing orange lights duct taped to the roof and HOA security slapped on the side in crooked vinyl letters. Sitting behind the wheel was a woman I'd had the displeasure of meeting before, Tamara Whitlow, the self-declared Vice President of Neighborhood Integrity for our HOA. I was out front, fixing the latch on the side gate, when I saw her roll to a stop in front of my driveway and whip out a walkie-talkie like she was part of some elite tactical unit. Children are unauthorized in the cul-de-sac unsupervised. I repeat code 87, she said into it, looking directly at my backyard where my 2 kids were playing with sidewalk chalk on our own driveway. My son, Sawyer, was 6. My daughter was 4 and couldn't even spell unsupervised. They were drawing smiley suns and stick dinosaurs. Not exactly a threat to the community. I stood up. Tamara, they're on my property. She didn't even flinch. Driveways are technically shared access zones under HOA Regulation 14b. Your children don't have adult supervision. I stepped closer. I'm right here. I've been watching them the whole time. Tamara narrowed her eyes behind oversized sunglasses that covered half her face. You're not within 10 feet. That's not direct supervision. That's when another figure emerged from the cart, some guy in cargo pants and a neon vest with security, written in Sharpie on the back. He looked like a failed mall cop impersonator. This your residence? He asked me, squinting like he was trying to intimidate me. I live here, yes. Who exactly are you? He pulled out a laminated badge clipped to his vest. Private Neighborhood Enforcement. Contracted through the HOA. I stared at the badge. It looked like something printed off a home printer. No license number, no company name. Just a generic eagle logo and Neighborhood Security Agent Level 2. Whatever that meant. Tamara crossed her arms. We've received multiple complaints about your children loitering, drawing offensive imagery. They were drawing dinosaurs. One of them had teeth, she snapped. I laughed. You're seriously trying to expel my kids from my own driveway? The fake security guy stepped forward. We're going to have to ask them to go inside. Continued noncompliance can result in fines or removal. Removal? I repeated. You're threatening to remove my kids from our own property? Tamara smiled like she'd just won a prize. It's for the safety of the community. If you don't cooperate, we'll escalate to enforcement. I pulled out my phone. Great. Let's escalate. I'll call the real police. Tamara's face twitched. That won't be necessary. Oh, it's necessary, I said, already dialing. Because you just threatened to remove minors from private property using some rent-a-cop with a fake badge. That's not an HOA violation. That's impersonating law enforcement. The fake officer stepped back. Hey, man, no need to get legal, but I was already talking to the dispatcher. I kept my eyes locked on Tamara the entire time. Yeah, I'd like to report someone impersonating security and attempting to remove my children from private property. I've got photos of the badge and video of the confrontation. Tamara turned pale. The guy in the vest muttered something and tried to get back into the cart. Don't move, I said. You're staying right here until the real cops show up. And sure enough, they did. The patrol car pulled up with lights off but engine humming, the way real law enforcement does when they're not looking to make a scene, just looking to assess. Officer Langley stepped out, a tall, broad man with a calm but calculating presence. He scanned the scene. The golf cart still idling with its blinking amber light, the man in the vest frozen halfway between stepping in or backing off, and Tamara standing with hands clasped like she was waiting to be congratulated. I kept still, holding my phone in one hand, still recording. The officer looked at me first. You made the call? I nodded. Yes, sir. I've got video of this man claiming to be authorized security and attempting to remove my children from my driveway without cause. He presented what looks like a fake badge. Langley's eyes shifted to the vest-wearing man, who now looked more like a teenager caught sneaking into a movie than a neighborhood enforcer. "Step over here," Langley said, voice even. The guy glanced at Tamara, who gave him a tiny nod like she still thought she held some kind of authority. He shuffled toward Langley, who motioned for him to turn around and place his hands on the hood of the patrol car. No hesitation. No formality. Just pure procedural dominance. "Name?" Langley asked. "Bryce. Bryce Heller." Langley reached for the badge still clipped to the vest and examined it. Then he turned it over and held it up to the fading sunlight. "This badge doesn't have a license number. No state seal. No company identifier. Where did you get this?" Bryce hesitated. I was told it was fine," Tamara said. Langley cut him off. "Who hired you?" Tamara finally broke her statue act. "We contracted him through a neighborhood watch liaison program. It's a private arrangement." Langley looked at her like she'd just claimed to be running a space agency from her garage. "There's no such program in the city's registry. You can't deploy private security in a residential zone without a license from the State Bureau. That's impersonation of law enforcement." Tamara's lips parted like she was about to protest, then closed again. Langley turned back to Bryce. "Do you have a license to operate as private security?" Bryce's voice cracked. I just did what she told me. I didn't know I needed one." Langley's jaw tightened. "Put your hands behind your back." Bryce's eyes widened. "Wait, what?" "I wasn't trying to hurt anybody. You impersonated a licensed profession and attempted to enforce authority over minors on private property. That's a criminal offense." I watched as Langley clipped on the cuffs, calm and methodical. No drama, just consequences. Bryce didn't resist. He just looked stunned, like he'd expected this gig to be a weekend hobby and not end with his face against a patrol car. Tamara tried to regain control. "This is a misunderstanding. He wasn't impersonating anyone, he was enforcing community standards." Langley turned toward her slowly. "Ma'am, unless you're a licensed security firm or law enforcement agency, you don't have the legal authority to hire or deploy someone in that capacity. That's not community enforcement. That's vigilantism." She puffed up. "I'll have you know I'm on the board. I have authority." "No," Langley said. "You don't. At best, you're part of a volunteer association. At worst, you're misusing that position to intimidate residents under color of law." That's when another cruiser rolled up. This time, it was Officer Rivera, a younger cop with a sharp eye for details. Langley waved her over and handed her Bryce. "Take him in. We'll book him under impersonation and unlawful detainment attempt." Rivera gently guided Bryce into the cruiser. He didn't say a word. Just sat down like someone who'd realized, far too late, that his cosplay had real-world consequences. Langley turned back to me. "Got the video?" I handed him my phone. He reviewed it briefly, nodding. "This helps. Especially the part where he says he's neighborhood enforcement. You'll want to send a copy to the city attorney's office. And maybe think about filing a complaint with the state licensing bureau." "I will," I said, watching Tamara with interest. "What about her?" Langley raised a brow.
"She's not walking away from this."
"She may not have worn the vest, but if she orchestrated it, she's complicit." Tamara stepped back. "I didn't impersonate anyone. I didn't even touch those kids." Langley's tone shifted. "But you instructed someone to act under false authority. That's conspiracy to commit impersonation. Depending on what else we find, it could escalate." A third car arrived, this one unmarked. A man in a blazer stepped out, holding a leather folder. Langley greeted him with a nod. "Deputy Inspector Ferris," Langley said. "We've got an HOA official deploying unauthorized security, detaining minors on private property, and misrepresenting authority." Ferris looked at me. "You the homeowner?" "Yes, sir." He flipped open his folder and pulled out a small form. "We've been getting complaints about this HOA for months. Nothing concrete until now. If you're willing to make a formal statement, We can open a case. I'll give you everything I've got. Ferris nodded.
Good.
We'll also be issuing an injunction against any further enforcement actions by the HOA until this is sorted. Tamara's face drained of color.
You can't do that, she said.
We have bylaws. Ferris didn't even look at her. Your bylaws don't supersede state law. And you don't get to make up your own police force. Langley turned back to me. In the meantime, if anyone tries anything else, call us. The moment they step out of line again, we'll be back. I thanked them, and they dispersed. Rivera driving off with Bryce, Ferris walking Tamara to his car like she was a witness, not a suspect. But I could see it in her posture. The board had just lost its enforcer, and now the city had eyes on them. That night, I sat on the porch with my wife, watching the sun dip behind the rooftops. The chalk dinosaurs were still there, teeth and all. My daughter had added a rainbow above them. My son was inside, playing with Legos, oblivious to the fact that he'd been the reason a chain of legal dominoes had just started falling. You think that's the end of it? My wife asked, sipping tea. No, I said. It's just the beginning. Because now I had proof.
Video.
A police report, a named suspect, and a city official who'd been waiting for someone to stand up. Tamara thought she had power because she had a clipboard and a title. But she'd just tried to turn a fake security force into her personal neighborhood army, and the law didn't like that one bit. Next up?
De deeper.
Pull the meeting minutes. Follow the money trail. Because if she was willing to fake security, what else had she been faking? And I had a feeling the truth was about to come out. The next morning, I walked into the city zoning office with a folder under one arm and a purpose sharp enough to slice through red tape. I'd spent most of the night compiling everything, printouts of the HOA's security emails, screenshots of their neighborhood watch announcements, and a notarized statement from my neighbor, Mrs. Delgado, whose grandson had also been approached by Tamara's so-called patrol last week. I was met by a clerk named Devin, who raised an eyebrow when I laid out the folder and said, I need to speak with your compliance officer about unauthorized enforcement activity by a homeowners association. He glanced down at the top page, where I'd taped a copy of the fake badge. His casual demeanor shifted. Give me a moment. 10 minutes later, I was seated across from a woman named Marlene Kessler. She wore a tailored blazer and had the calm intensity of someone who spent her life dissecting bureaucratic nonsense with surgical precision. She didn't ask small talk questions. Just pulled the file toward her, flipped through it, and said, How long has this been going on? This patrol thing? A few weeks. But I think it goes deeper. There's language in their newsletters that implies they've been operating outside their authority for a while. She tapped a fingertip on a note I'd highlighted. This part about enforcement capabilities, you said this wording was in their official HOA bulletin? 3 issues in a row. They've been pushing the idea that they're deputized to maintain order. But there's no licensing, no insurance, nothing legal about it. Marlene stood up. Come with me. She led me down a hallway lined with framed maps of the city and into a conference room where 2 men were already seated. One was a middle-aged man with thinning hair, the other wore a pin that marked him as part of the municipal legal team. This is Assistant City Attorney Greer, she said. And this is Darnell from Licensing and Regulation. Greer gestured to a seat. We've had 2 other reports from your neighborhood. Yours is the first with documentation. That makes it actionable. Darnell opened his laptop. Do you have anything showing they collected dues or fines in connection with this so-called patrol? I flipped open a separate folder.
Here.
This is a payment notice my neighbor received. It's labeled Security Compliance Surcharge. $50 per household. No vote. No meeting. Darnell's eyebrows climbed. That's illegal. You can't levy a security fee without a licensed vendor and a majority vote from residents. And compliance surcharge makes it sound like they're punishing people. Greer leaned forward.
We can move on this.
But we'll need to freeze their accounts and issue a cease and desist on all enforcement efforts. If they've spent dues on unlicensed personnel, that's misappropriation of association funds. They paid the guy in cash, I added. Bryce didn't have a contract. Just a text thread between him and Tamara. Marlene looked at Darnell. Get the financial review request filed with the county. We'll also need a subpoena for their vendor list. Greer pushed back his chair. Do us a favor. If you hear of any board meetings coming up, let us know. We'll want someone there. I nodded. There's one this Thursday. It's supposed to be closed to non-board members, but I've already requested the minutes under the Davis-Sterling Act. Marlene smiled tightly. Perfect. We'll be ready. By the time I left City Hall, things had shifted. This wasn't just about Tamara's power trip. This was about fraud, misuse of funds, and mobilizing unlicensed private enforcement under the guise of neighborhood safety. They hadn't just crossed a line, they'd sprinted past it waving a flag. Back in the neighborhood, the atmosphere had changed. Word had traveled fast. Bryce's arrest hadn't stayed quiet. Someone had filmed it from their porch, and the video was now circulating on Nextdoor and local Facebook groups. The community reaction was split. Half the residents were furious and embarrassed, the other half were confused and asking how long this had been going on. I was walking past the park when I spotted Ron, one of the longest-standing residents here. Retired firefighter. His wife ran the local food pantry. Solid people. You stirred the hornet's nest, he said without preamble. Didn't have much choice. He nodded. You're not wrong. HOA's been getting bolder ever since Tamara and that crew took over. They shut down the old committee and consolidated everything under that operations nonsense. I'd seen that term operations committee, but hadn't found any official record of its creation in the HOA charter. You know who's on that committee? Ron scratched his chin. Tamara, her brother-in-law, and that guy Gerald who says he's a CPA but never actually uses the title. They started it last year, said it was for expedited decisions. Ever see a vote to approve it? Not once. And I've been to every meeting they didn't cancel. That was the final puzzle piece. They'd built a shadow committee to bypass formal votes and procedures, which meant any financial decisions made through it were invalid. I thanked Ron and went straight home, where I gathered the last of my documents and emailed everything to Marlene and Greer. Then I sat down with my wife and told her everything. She listened carefully, arms folded, eyes steady. So, what's next? They'll probably freeze the HOA's accounts, launch a full audit. If the operations committee isn't in the charter, they'll be forced to disband it. Tamara may face charges for misuse of funds and unauthorized enforcement. And the rest of the board? If they knew, they're accessories. If they didn't, they're negligent. Either way, they're done. Thursday came fast. I showed up to the board meeting with a copy of the Davis-Sterling Act and a printed list of resident signatures demanding transparency. There were nearly 40 names, more than half the neighborhood. The meeting was held at the clubhouse, which sat on the corner lot near the tennis courts. It was supposed to be for community events, but over the past year, the board had posted private meeting signs whenever they used it. Not this time. Marlene was already there, standing near the entrance in plain clothes, with a folder tucked under one arm. Greer arrived 5 minutes later, accompanied by 2 officers in plain uniform. Tamara and the remaining board members were inside, seated behind a folding table with nameplates. Gerald looked like he hadn't slept. The air was thick with tension. Greer stepped to the front. This meeting is now under supervision by the city attorney's office. Due to credible allegations of financial misconduct and unauthorized enforcement activity, we're initiating a temporary suspension of board operations pending investigation. Tamara stood up. You can't do that. Marlene stepped forward. Yes, we can. The HOA operates under state law. You've violated multiple provisions, including illegal disbursement of funds, creation of unauthorized subcommittees, and employment of unlicensed security personnel. Gerald opened his mouth, then closed it again. Another board member, Linda, quietly slid her nameplate off the table and put it in her purse. Greer turned to the officers. "Please escort Ms. Whitlow to the back. She's being detained for questioning regarding financial impropriety and conspiracy to commit impersonation of public officials." Tamara backed away. "This is harassment." The room was silent except for the click of her heels as the officers guided her out. Greer turned to the residents. "As of now, a temporary trustee will be appointed to oversee HOA operations while we conduct a formal audit. If you've paid any security fees or received unauthorized notices, please bring them to the city office." There was a pause, then someone clapped. Then another. A wave of relieved applause broke out, not loud but steady. The spell was broken. As I walked out into the cool night air, Ron caught up to me. "You did good." I shook my head. "We did." Everyone who spoke up. Everyone who didn't stay quiet. He nodded.
Still.
"You lit the match." I looked back at the clubhouse, now quiet and stripped of its false authority. "Sometimes," I said, "the only way to fix rot is to burn it out." And this time, the fire had started with nothing more than a chalk dinosaur, a phone camera, and someone who finally said, "Enough." 2 weeks after the board was suspended and Tamara was escorted out of the clubhouse, the neighborhood felt like it had been unplugged from a power grid that had been humming too long and too loud. The constant patrols stopped. The bulletins vanished from mailboxes. Even the ridiculous orange lights on the golf cart were gone impounded, I later found out, along with most of the HOA's remaining equipment. But something about it didn't sit right with me. The deeper silence. The way Gerald and the other board members had folded so quickly without protest. It wasn't relief, it was fear. Like they were more worried about what might come out than what already had. I spent the next several days requesting internal financial reports. Not the sanitized ones they handed out at annual meetings, but the raw records that had to be submitted to the county by law. I cross-checked those with homeowner dues and vendor payments. That's when I found it. 4 separate transfers, each labeled Operational Discretion Exterior Services. Each for slightly over $12,000. Spread out over 10 months. All paid to an LLC called Orion Property Solutions. A company that, according to the state business registry, didn't exist. I brought the documents to Marlene at the city office. She scanned the pages, her expression hardening with every line. "This isn't just mismanagement," she said. "This is fraud. They created a fake vendor." "Think it was Tamara?" I asked. Marlene shook her head. "Maybe. But this feels layered. A name like this, you don't choose something vague unless you want it buried." That afternoon, Greer looped in a financial crimes investigator from the district attorney's office. A forensic audit team was assigned to the HOA's accounts. Within days, they uncovered what I hadn't seen. The transfers to Orion were routed through a personal checking account under Gerald's name. Not only that, but 3 other board members had received consulting disbursements tied to the same routing chain. The next week, I was called to testify in a closed-door hearing at the county courthouse. I brought everything: the emails, the printouts, the vendor registry screenshots. I sat across from a panel of investigators, explaining how I'd tracked the payments, how the operations committee had never been ratified by the community, how the so-called security program had been the tip of the iceberg. The panel was quiet for most of it until I mentioned the disbursements. That's when the questioning shifted. "Did any residents ever approve these expenditures?" one of the investigators asked. "No," I said. "There were no budget meetings. No votes. They operated behind closed doors." "Do you have reason to believe the board was aware this vendor was fake?" "They wrote the checks to it." 3 days later, Gerald was arrested at his home. The county released a statement confirming that the HOA board had embezzled nearly $60,000 under the guise of operational costs. The Orion account had been set up using a stolen EIN number from a defunct landscaping business. Gerald had used it to funnel the funds into shell accounts, then distributed it as consulting fees to the other board members. The fallout spread like wildfire. 2 of the former board members lawyered up immediately. One fled the state, but was picked up in Nevada and extradited. Tamara was already facing charges for conspiracy and impersonation. Now, she was at the center of a full-blown financial crime case. Still, there was one question left unanswered: where had the money gone? Not just the transfers, but the cash payments to Bryce and others. The audit team found something interesting: a leased warehouse unit on the edge of town, paid for in full using HOA funds under the name Community Storage Initiative. When the police raided the unit, they found more than just unused traffic cones and fake security badges. Inside were crates of surveillance equipment, motion detectors, cameras, number plate readers, boxes of printed forms labeled Resident Behavior Citations. One wall had a corkboard with a map of the neighborhood, dotted with pinned photos and names of specific homeowners. My name was there. So was Ron's. Even Mrs. Delgado's grandson had a file. It wasn't just about fines or power. They were building a private monitoring system, a full-blown surveillance network. They'd intended to install tracking devices under the guise of community safety enhancements. The golf cart patrols were just phase 1. When I saw the photos from the warehouse, something inside me went cold. This had never been about enforcing rules. It was about control. Tamara and her inner circle had been preparing to turn our neighborhood into their own private surveillance state. The DA's office added new charges: criminal conspiracy, unlawful surveillance, and wire fraud. The case against the former board members was airtight. Between the financial records, the equipment, and the testimony from residents, all 5 faced serious prison time. The city appointed a legal trustee to oversee the HOA's dissolution. Not reformation, dissolution. The governing body was officially disbanded. A new community association would be formed from scratch, with mandatory transparency clauses and term limits. I volunteered to serve on the transitional committee, along with Ron and 3 other residents who had been outspoken throughout the ordeal. At our first open meeting, held in the park under the old sycamore tree, nearly the entire neighborhood showed up.
No folding tables.
No closed doors. Just people talking, listening, deciding. A woman from the city clerk's office stepped forward. Going forward, all budgets will be published monthly. Any changes will require 2/3 approval. And no one, she added, eyeing the crowd, will ever patrol your driveway unless you ask them to. There was laughter, relieved, genuine. The kind of laughter that only comes after tension breaks. After the meeting, Sawyer came running up to me with his sister. He held out a new drawing. This one had dinosaurs too, but they were standing on top of a building labeled HOA Headquarters, breathing fire. "Is this what happened?" he asked. I crouched down beside him. "Pretty much." "Did the dinosaurs win?" I looked up, seeing the crowd gather around the snack table. Someone had brought cookies and lemonade. People were laughing, shaking hands, planning a block party. "Yeah," I said. "They did." As the sun dipped below the rooftops and the shadows grew long again, I sat on the grass with my family, watching the kids play. For the first time in a long while, the neighborhood felt like it belonged to the people who lived in it, not the ones who tried to rule it. Justice had been served not by force, but by persistence, by facts, by truth. And a little bit of chalk.